Hello, I hope you're doing well. Today we are going to discuss the book How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk by Adele Faber and Elaine Moslish. This 30th anniversary edition was published in 2012 by Scribner, a division of Simon & Schuster Inc. in New York, NY. This is an independent summary, and under no circumstances does it replace reading the original work. Let's get one thing straight. Your job isn't to make your kids happy. It's to stop them from becoming tiny, useless tyrants who collapse the first time life doesn't hand them a participation trophy. You think you're helping by telling them, you're not sad, or there's no reason to be angry. You're just teaching them they're crazy for feeling what they're feeling. It's like your kid says, my leg is broken, and you say, nonsense, you just need to walk it off. It's gaslighting, and it breeds resentment and confusion. I once tried to convince a girlfriend she wasn't actually mad about me forgetting her birthday. I just argued her into being more mad. It turns out telling people their feelings are wrong is a fantastic way to get them to hate your guts, and your kids are no exception. The core existential problem here is that you can't control how your kid feels, but you sure as hell can control whether you make it worse. So, choose your problem. Do you want a kid who's a mess but can talk about it, or a kid who's a mess and thinks they have to hide it from you? Pick one. 1.1. The Great Emotional Con. Most parenting is built on a foundation of well-intentioned lies. We tell our kids not to trust their own senses from day one. I'm cold, they say. No, you're not. It's nice in here, you reply. What they hear is, your internal thermometer is busted. Mine is the only one that works. We do this because their feelings are inconvenient. Their sadness, their anger, their boredom. It's all a massive pain in the ass when you're just trying to get through a trip to the grocery store without a public meltdown. So we deny, we rationalize, we philosophize, we tell them to look on the bright side. And what we're really saying is, your feelings are a problem. Please make them go away. This constant denial doesn't make the feelings disappear. It just shoves them underground where they fester and mutate into bigger, uglier behavioral problems. The kid who isn't allowed to be sad about a broken toy becomes the teenager who punches a wall for no apparent reason. It's a direct pipeline. The truth is, feelings just are. They're not good or bad. They're just signals from our brain's screwed up wiring. Trying to argue with a feeling is like trying to argue with the weather. It's pointless, and you just end up looking like an idiot shouting at a cloud. The authors, Faber and Moslish, stumbled upon this after getting worn down by their own broods. They realized their attempts to cheerlead their kids out of bad moods were just sparking bigger arguments. The alternative isn't to become some kind of emotional doormat, letting your kids run wild. It's simply to acknowledge the damn weather. Ah, I see. It's raining tears in here. Acknowledging a feeling doesn't mean you endorse it or even have to like it. It means you're willing to look at reality, and the reality is that your kid is currently a swirling vortex of irrational emotion. Your job is to be the lighthouse, not another wave crashing against them. 1.2. The 4 Horsemen of Not Screwing It Up. So if you're supposed to stop denying feelings, what the hell are you supposed to do instead? The book lays out a few ridiculously simple, yet infuriatingly difficult skills. These aren't magic spells. They're just tools to stop you from making a bad situation worse, which, let's be honest, is a massive win in the parenting game. 1. Listen with full attention. This sounds obvious, but it's not. It doesn't mean half listening while you scroll through your phone. It means shutting your mouth, putting the device down, and actually paying attention as if what they're saying matters, even if it's a 20-minute monologue about a dead bug. Sometimes, all a kid needs is a silent, attentive audience to work through their own crap. It's amazing what problems people can solve on their own if you just give them the space to do it without constantly interrupting with your brilliant advice. 2. Acknowledge with a word. You don't need to launch into a therapeutic monologue. Simple grunts of acknowledgement, oh, I see, are surprisingly effective. They're conversational placeholders that say, I'm still here, I'm tracking this nonsense, please continue. They are invitations for the child to go deeper, to explore their own thoughts without you leading the witness. It stops you from questioning, blaming, or advising, which is your default setting because you think you're the hero who needs to fix everything. You're not. 3. Give the feeling a name. When your kid is freaking out, they're often overwhelmed because they don't even know what to call the demon possessing them. Giving the feeling a name. That sounds incredibly frustrating. Or it seems like you're really disappointed, gives them a handle to grab onto. You're not making it worse by naming it. You're making it concrete and manageable. It moves it from a terrifying, amorphous blob of awfulness into a specific problem called frustration or disappointment. And once it has a name, it can be dealt with. 4. Give them their wishes in fantasy. This one feels the most absurd, but it's a killer trick for de-escalation. When a kid wants something they can't have, logic is useless. Explaining why they can't have a pet unicorn will only make them want the unicorn more. Instead, you join them in their delusion. You wish you had a unicorn, man. I wish I could get you a unicorn that shoots rainbows out of its butt and poops ice cream. You're not promising a unicorn. You're communicating that you understand the depth of their ridiculous desire. It validates the longing without giving in to the demand. And often, that's enough to make the reality of not getting a unicorn a little easier to swallow. These aren't about being a soft, permissive parent. All feelings are acceptable. Not all actions are. You can say, I see you're angry enough at your brother to want to launch him into the sun, while also saying, but we don't use rocket launchers in the house. Tell him what you want with words, not fists. It's about accepting the inner world without letting it burn down the outer world. You're not fixing their problems. You're giving them the tools and the permission to start fixing them themselves. 2.1. The myth of obedience. Let's talk about getting kids to cooperate, which is mostly a fantasy we tell ourselves to keep from day drinking. The default parenting mode is to issue commands like a low-level manager on a power trip. Clean your room, do your homework, stop hitting your sister with a cantaloupe. And then we act surprised when the immediate response is resistance, whining, or a cantaloupe-related counterattack. Here's a soul-crushing truth. The more you order people around, the less they want to do what you say. It's human nature. Nobody likes to be a pawn in someone else's game, especially not a small person who has zero control over anything else in their life except whether or not to put on their shoes. I learned this the hard way, trying to get a band I was in to practice more. The more I nagged, the more they forgot their gear or showed up late. I was trying to force a result, and all I did was kill the very thing I wanted, their willing participation. Your kids are the same. When you issue a direct order, you're not inviting cooperation. You're starting a power struggle. And it's a struggle you're destined to lose because they have way more time and energy to be stubborn than you do. The existential choice here is brutal. Do you want to be a dictator of a tiny, rebellious nation that secretly hates you? Or do you want to figure out a way to make them want to be on your team? Your ego wants to be the boss, but your sanity is begging you to try something else. The problem is that we, as parents, are stuck in a loop. We nag, they ignore. We escalate, they dig in their heels. We yell, they cry or yell back. We threaten, they comply with resentment, learning nothing except that the person with the most power wins. This whole cycle is exhausting, and it poisons the relationship. It turns your home into a battlefield of wills instead of, a place where people can relax without being bossed around every 5 minutes. Faber and Maslish argue that this whole approach is fundamentally broken because it ignores the child's feelings and their need for autonomy. A child who is constantly being told what to do, how to do it, and when to do it feels disrespected and incompetent. That feeling of being controlled is what fuels the resistance. They're not being difficult just to piss you off, though that can be a bonus for them. They're fighting for a shred of dignity. So the first step to getting cooperation is to stop demanding it. You have to change the game entirely, moving away from commands and threats and toward a language that invites partnership, even if it feels unnatural and ridiculously indirect at first. 2.2, the Cooperation Toolkit, a guide for the weary. If barking orders doesn't work, what's the alternative? The book offers a set of tools designed to get you out of the nagging business and into something that feels less like a hostage negotiation. These aren't silver bullets. They're just different ways to approach the same old infuriating problems. They all boil down to one principle. Treat your kids like they have a brain and a soul, and they might occasionally act like it. 1. Describe the problem. Instead of giving an order, just describe what you see, like a sports commentator calling a really boring game. Don't say, clean up this mess. Say, I see a wet towel on the new sofa. Don't say, you left the milk out again. Say, the milk is on the counter. This is maddeningly passive-aggressive at first, but it works on a subtle psychological level. You're not blaming or accusing, you're just stating a fact. This gives the child the opportunity to see the problem for themselves and, more importantly, to figure out the solution on their own. It shifts the responsibility from you, the enforcer, to them, the problem solver. It's a way of saying, I trust you to see what needs to be done here and to do it, which is a hell of a lot more respectful than, you're a slob, fix it now. 2. Give information. This is the slightly more direct cousin of describing. It's about explaining the consequences of an action, rather than just forbidding the action itself. Instead of, don't leave your toys on the stairs, try, toys on the stairs can be dangerous. Someone could trip and fall. Instead of, turn off the lights, try, we're wasting electricity when lights are left on in an empty room. This method gives kids a reason to comply that isn't just, because I said so. It appeals to their, admittedly small and self-centered, sense of logic and empathy. It turns an arbitrary rule into a sensible guideline that protects people or resources. It won't work every time, but it builds a foundation of understanding that is far more durable than fear of punishment. 3. Say it with a word. After you've nagged your kid about the same thing 8,000 times, they don't need the full lecture anymore. They know the deal. At that point, a long reminder just feels like you're rubbing their face in it. The one-word reminder is a tool of beautiful, minimalist efficiency. Instead of a whole speech about dental hygiene, you just say, teeth. Instead of, is your backpack ready for school tomorrow? Did you pack your lunch? Where are your shoes? You just say, backpack. The single word is a gentle, non-accusatory nudge. It implies, I know you know what to do. This is just a little ping to remind you to do it. It's respectful of their intelligence and your own vocal cords. 4. Describe what you feel. This one requires vulnerability, which most of us avoid like it's a contagious disease. It's about using I statements to express how their behavior affects you. Instead of, you're being so loud and annoying, try, I'm finding it hard to concentrate with all this noise. Or, I get really frustrated when I have to ask 3 times for the table to be set. This isn't about guilt-tripping them. It's about revealing your own human reaction without attacking their character. It changes the dynamic from them being the bad kid to you being a person with limits and feelings. It's a surprisingly powerful way to motivate change because most kids, deep down, don't actually want to make their parents miserable. 5. Write a note. When all else fails and you're on the verge of a full-blown tantrum, your own, not the kids', changing the medium can change everything. A written note can be a funny, disarming way to get a message across without a confrontation. A sign on the TV that says, I want to be watched, but only after homework is done. Love the TV. A note taped to an empty toilet paper roll that says, help, I need a replacement. It introduces an element of humor and playfulness into what is usually a tense situation. It breaks the cycle of verbal warfare and allows the message to be received in a completely different way. It feels less like a command and more like a creative nudge, and sometimes that's all it takes. 3.1. The punishment trap. Let's be honest, punishment is the lazy parent's go-to move. It's easy, it feels weirdly satisfying in a primal sort of way, and it gives the illusion of control. The kid messes up, you lay down the law, they get scared or miserable, and the problem is solved, for now. But here's the ugly truth. Punishment is a short-term fix that creates long-term disasters. It doesn't teach a kid how to behave better, it just teaches them how to not get caught. I remember getting grounded for a month for sneaking out. Did I learn a valuable lesson about responsibility? Hell no. I learned that my parents' bedroom window was creaky and I needed to be quieter next time. Punishment breeds resentment. inspires revenge fantasies, and makes kids more devious, not more virtuous. Instead of thinking, wow, what I did was wrong and hurt someone, they think, my parents are assholes and I'm going to get them back. Existential dilemma is this. Are you trying to raise a moral, self-regulating human, or are you just trying to train a pet who obeys out of fear? Because those are two very different goals, and punishment only gets you the second one. The core issue with punishment is that it diverts all the child's mental energy away from contemplating their own actions and focuses it squarely on you, the punisher. Their brain gets hijacked by thoughts of anger, injustice, and revenge. It's not fair. They can't do this to me. Next time, I'll be smarter. There is zero room in that headspace for self-reflection or empathy for the person they wronged. You wanted them to think about what they did, but instead they're just thinking about what you did to them. You've successfully made yourself the villain of their story, which is a pretty crappy role to play in your own family. Faber and Maslish argue that the desire to punish stems from our own anger and helplessness. We feel out of control, so we reach for a tool that makes us feel powerful, even if that tool is actively sabotaging our goal of raising a decent person. The whole system is a feedback loop of negative emotions. The child's misbehavior makes us angry, our angry punishment makes the child angry, and that anger fuels their next misbehavior. It's a vicious cycle that makes everyone miserable and teaches nothing of value. 3.2. Escaping the cycle. Alternatives that don't suck. So if punishment is off the table, how do you stop your house from descending into a Lord of the Flies situation? The goal isn't to let kids get away with everything. It's to find consequences that are helpful instead of hurtful. It's about problem solving, not power tripping. This requires more creativity and patience than just sending a kid to their room, but the payoff is a child who actually learns something. 1. Express your feelings strongly, without attacking character. You're allowed to be angry. The key is to express that anger without branding your kid as a bad person. Don't say, you're so thoughtless and irresponsible. Say, I am furious that my new saw was left out in the rain and is now rusted. The first one attacks who they are. The second one attacks what they did. It's a crucial distinction. When you express your feelings about a specific action, you give them a chance to focus on the problem at hand, the rusty saw, instead of just defending their own character from your verbal assault. State your expectations. Be clear and firm about what you expect. I expect that when you use my tools, you clean them and put them back where you found them. This isn't a suggestion. It's a clear statement of a standard or a rule. It sets a boundary and communicates that you believe they are capable of meeting it. It treats them like a responsible party who can handle the rules, not a criminal who needs to be controlled. 3. Show the child how to make amends. This is where the magic happens. Instead of making them suffer, give them a way to fix what they broke, literally or figuratively. What this saw needs now is some steel wool and a lot of elbow grease. This shifts the focus from punishment to restitution. It teaches them that when you make a mistake, the responsible thing to do is to try to make it right. It's a real-world lesson that is infinitely more valuable than sitting in a corner feeling sorry for yourself. It gives them a sense of agency and restores their feeling of being a good person who just messed up. 4. Offer a choice. When possible, give them a choice in how they deal with the consequences. You can borrow my tools and return them, or you can give up the privilege of using them. You decide. This puts the ball squarely in their court. They are no longer a passive victim of your rules. They are an active agent in their own fate. The power to choose, even between two undesirable options, restores their sense of autonomy and makes them take ownership of the outcome. 5. Take action. Problem solving. Sometimes you have to act. If kids are fighting over a toy, take the toy. But the framing is everything. You're not saying, you're both punished, no one gets it. You're saying, this toy is causing a problem. We'll put it away until you two can figure out a way to share it peacefully. The focus is on solving the immediate problem, the fighting, and creating an opportunity for them to develop a future solution, learning to share. 6. Let them experience the natural consequences. If a kid refuses to wear a jacket, let them be cold, as long as it's not dangerous. If they forget their lunch, let them be hungry. Life is a powerful teacher, and sometimes the most effective consequences are the ones that happen without your intervention at all. It teaches them to connect their choices directly with their outcomes, a lesson that no amount of lecturing can ever replicate. The goal of all these alternatives is to keep the child's self-esteem intact while still holding them accountable. It's about teaching them to be responsible for their actions because it's the right thing to do, not because they're afraid of what you'll do to them if they don't. 4.1. The dependency trap. Let's be real. We love it when our kids need us. It feeds our ego and makes us feel important, like we're the all-knowing source of wisdom and can-opening skills. But this dependency, which starts as a biological necessity, can quickly turn into a psychological prison for both you and your kid. We get so used to making decisions for them, solving their problems, and answering their every question that we accidentally cripple them. We create a little human who is terrified of making a choice without our approval, a person who is functionally helpless in the face of minor life challenges. I once dated someone who called her mom to ask how to boil an egg. That's not cute. It's a failure of parenting. You've created a dependency machine that will be calling you from their first adult apartment to ask where the spare toilet paper is. The existential horror here is realizing you've spent 18 years raising a person who can't function as a separate entity. Your job is not to be your child's permanent life support system. It's to make yourself progressively obsolete. That's the brutal, unglamorous goal, to raise them so well that they don't need you anymore. The trap is that promoting autonomy feels like rejection, both to us and to them. When a kid says, "I can do it myself," our first instinct is often a mix of relief and a strange sense of loss. We're so accustomed to being the hero, the fixer, the manager of their lives, that when they start to manage it themselves, it feels like we're being demoted. So we help when help isn't needed. We rush in to solve problems before they've even had a chance to struggle with them. We answer questions for them that they could answer for themselves. Every time we do this, we send a subtle toxic message. You're not capable. You can't handle this without me. This constant intervention, born from a place of love and anxiety, systematically erodes their self-confidence and their motivation to try things on their own. Faber and Maslish argue that true love isn't doing everything for your child. It's stepping back and letting them do for themselves, even if it means watching them struggle, fail, and get frustrated. It's about respecting their journey toward becoming a separate, competent human being, even when it's messy and inconvenient and takes way longer than if you just did it yourself. 4.2. How to make yourself useless, a guide to fostering autonomy. So, how do you stop being the overbearing COO of your child's life and start fostering some actual independence? It means letting go, which is the hardest thing for a parent to do. It involves biting your tongue, sitting on your hands, and trusting that your kid won't immediately self-destruct if you're not micromanaging their every move. 1. Let them make choices. Offer choices as much as possible, even in small things. Do you want to wear the red shirt or the blue shirt? Do you want to have your bath now or after we read a story? This simple act gives them a sense of control over their own lives. It's practice for the bigger choices they'll have to make later. You're not asking if they want a bath. You're just giving them a say in the timing. It's a small dose of power that can drastically increase their willingness to cooperate. Number 2, show respect for their struggle. When a kid is struggling with something, tying a shoe, opening a jar, figuring out a math problem, your instinct is to jump in and save them. Don't. Instead, acknowledge the difficulty. Tying shoes can be tricky. That lid is on really tight. This validates their experience without taking the problem away from them. It tells them that it's okay to struggle, that struggle is part of learning, and that you have faith in their ability to eventually figure it out. 3. Don't ask too many questions. We bombard our kids with questions because we think it shows we're interested. How was school? What did you do? Who did you play with? What did you learn? To a kid, this can feel less like interest and more like an interrogation. It can feel intrusive and controlling. Sometimes, the best way to find out about their day is just to be available and say something simple like, "I'm glad to see you," and then wait. The information will often come out on its own, in its own time, when they feel like sharing. not when they feel like they're being deposed. 4. Don't rush to answer questions. When your kid asks a question, don't just spit out the answer. Turn it back on them. That's an interesting question. What do you think? This encourages them to use their own brain, to find their own resources, to become a thinker instead of just a passive recipient of information. It sends the message that their ideas have value and that they are capable of finding answers themselves. 5. Encourage children to use sources outside the home. You don't have to be the sole expert on everything. When they have a question you can't answer, don't make something up. Point them toward someone who does know. I'm not sure why the sky is blue. Maybe the librarian at the library could help us find a book about that. The shoe repairman would know the best way to fix that strap. This teaches them a critical life skill, how to find information and help in the wider world. It expands their universe beyond the family unit and shows them that resources are all around them. 6. Don't take away hope. This one is about their dreams and ambitions, which will often be completely ridiculous. When your kid says they want to be a rock star astronaut who also runs an alpaca farm, your instinct might be to inject a heavy dose of reality. Resist. Don't say, that's impossible. Say, so you want to play guitar in space while surrounded by alpacas. That would take a lot of work and some very special equipment. You're not lying to them. You're letting them hold on to the dream while gently pointing out the reality of what it would entail. You're protecting the spark of ambition from being extinguished by your own jaded cynicism. After all, most of the world's great achievements started as someone's ridiculous, impossible-seeming idea. 5.1. The praise paradox. Praise feels like the one thing in parenting you can't screw up. It's positive, it's encouraging, it's supposed to build self-esteem. We throw it around like confetti. You're so smart, good boy, what a great artist. But here's the kick in the teeth. A lot of the praise we use is not only useless, it's actively harmful. It creates praise junkies, kids who are so desperate for that external validation that they become terrified of doing anything that might not earn them another hit. I had a friend who was called the smart one his whole childhood. You know what he did? Yo kid, he avoided any subject in school where he wasn't guaranteed to be the best. He was so scared of losing his smart label that he refused to risk looking dumb. And so he stopped learning. That's the praise paradox. By trying to build their confidence, you can inadvertently make it incredibly fragile, dependent entirely on the judgment of others. The existential problem is that you think you're building them up, but you're actually building a prison of expectations that they'll spend their whole lives trying to live up to or escape from. The issue lies in evaluative praise, the kind that judges the child's character or abilities. You're a good girl. You're a natural athlete. This kind of praise is dangerous for a few reasons. First, it can feel dishonest. The kid knows they're not always a good girl, so the praise feels like a manipulation, a tool you're using to get them to behave. Second, it can create anxiety. If you're praised for being a great helper, you might become reluctant to say no next time, even if you're overwhelmed, for fear of losing your title. Third, it can cause them to immediately deny it or test it. You say, "This room is so clean. You're so responsible." And they might immediately point out the dust under the bed or throw a shirt on the floor just to prove you wrong and relieve the pressure of your judgment. Finally, and most importantly, it gets them focused on the praise itself, not on the internal satisfaction of their own accomplishment. They learn to work for the good job, not for the pride of a job well done. Faber and Maslish aren't saying we should stop encouraging our kids. They're saying we need to get smarter about how we do it, shifting from judging them to describing what they've done. 5.2 Helpful Praise. How to encourage without messing them up. If good job is out, what are you supposed to say? The alternative is a form of praise that is descriptive and focuses on effort and specific actions rather than on character traits. It's about being a mirror, reflecting their accomplishments back at them so they can see their own strengths, rather than just hearing your evaluation of them. It's more work than just spouting a generic compliment, but it builds a sturdier, more internal kind of self-esteem. 1. Describe what you see. This is the cornerstone of helpful praise. Instead of evaluating, just describe. Don't say, What a beautiful drawing. Say, I see you used a lot of bright red and a big purple circle right in the middle. And look at all those tiny green lines. Don't say, you were so good at the store. Say, I noticed you waited patiently in the cart while I was checking out, even though it was taking a long time. This approach allows the child to be the one to the positive conclusion about themselves. When you describe the effort and detail in their drawing, they are the ones who get to think, yeah, I did work hard on that. I'm a good artist. The positive feeling comes from within, which is where it belongs. 2. Describe the effect on you. Share how their action has positively impacted you or others. Instead of a generic, thanks for your help, try something more specific. It was such a help to have you set the table. It meant that I could focus on finishing dinner and we could all eat sooner. This shows them that their contributions have real, tangible value. It connects their actions to the well-being of the family or the group, which is a powerful motivator for pro-social behavior. It teaches them that their actions matter in a practical way, not just as a way to earn a pat on the head. 3. Sum it up in a word. Just like the one-word reminder for cooperation, a single, well-chosen word can be a powerful form of praise. After watching your kids struggle with a puzzle and finally fit the last piece, you don't need a big speech. You can just look at them, smile, and say, perseverance. You see them share a toy without being asked, generosity. This method names the virtue they just demonstrated without being overly effusive or judgy. You're not saying you are a generous person, which is a heavy label. You're just identifying the quality of the action they just took, allowing them to see that quality in themselves. It's a subtle but profound way to build character. The goal of this new kind of praise isn't to pump your kid full of hot air and tell them they're the greatest thing since sliced bread. It's to help them develop a realistic and resilient picture of themselves. It's to teach them to evaluate their own work, to find satisfaction in their own efforts, and to see themselves as people who are capable of perseverance, creativity, and kindness. You're moving from being the judge of their worth to being the enthusiastic narrator of their achievements. It's a shift that helps them build a foundation of confidence that won't crumble the first time someone doesn't tell them, good job. 6.1. The prison of roles. We love to put people in boxes. It makes the world feel simpler and more predictable. And we do it to our kids all the time, usually without even thinking about it. One kid is the smart one. Another is the athletic one. One is the shy one. Another is the troublemaker. We assign these roles early, and then we reinforce them over and over until they become self-fulfilling prophecies. The kid who is told he's clumsy will start dropping things to live up to the label. The bossy older sister will keep bossing because that's the part she's been cast to play in the family drama. I knew a family where one son was the responsible one, and the other was the dreamer. Guess who ended up running the family business, and guess who ended up living in the basement at 35, working on his novel? The labels became their destiny. The existential problem here is that when you cast your child in a role, you're not just describing them, you're writing their script. You're handing them a life sentence in a character box that might have nothing to do with who they really are or who they could become. These roles, even the positive ones, are incredibly limiting. The smart one feels immense pressure to be perfect and may be afraid to try new things where they might not excel. The funny one may feel like they can never be taken seriously or show sadness. And the negative roles are pure poison. A child who is constantly told they are naughty, difficult, or lazy will eventually internalize that identity and act accordingly. Why bother trying to be good if everyone has already decided you're bad? It's easier to just lean into the role you've been assigned. We reinforce these roles in 1,000 subtle ways. The stories we tell about them. Oh, David's always been the picky eater. The way we introduce them to others. This is Sarah. She's our little artist. And the way we interpret their behavior through the lens of the label we've already given them. Faber and Maslish argue that one of our most important jobs as parents is to break down these boxes and give our kids the freedom to be their full, complicated, contradictory selves. It's about seeing them as they are in the moment, not as a character they've been playing for years. 6.2. The Great Escape. Freeing kids from their roles. So, how do you bust your kid out of the character prison you've inadvertently built for them? It requires a conscious effort to see them in a new light and to give them opportunities to see themselves differently too. It's about rewriting the family script and allowing for some improvisation. 1. Look for opportunities to show the child a new picture of themselves. You have to actively hunt for evidence that contradicts the old label. If you have a helpless child who can never find anything, and one day they manage to find their own shoes, you seize on that moment. You don't just let it pass. You say, you looked in the closet and under the couch, and you found your shoes all by yourself. That's what I call resourcefulness. You are providing a concrete example of them being something other than helpless. You are giving them a new piece of data about themselves to work with. Put children in situations where they can see themselves differently. This is about engineering experiences that challenge the old role. If your shy child is nervous about a party, don't just let them hide behind you. Give them a job. Could you do me a huge favor and pass around this tray of snacks? The role of helper gives them a script to follow and a reason to interact with people that feels less terrifying than just making conversation. They might come away from that experience thinking, hey, I talked to a bunch of people and didn't die. Maybe I'm not just a shy person. 3. Let children overhear you say something positive about them. This is a Jedi mind trick of parenting, and it's incredibly effective. Kids will often dismiss praise said directly to their face, but if they overhear you saying something positive about them to someone else, your spouse, a friend, grandma, they will absorb it like a sponge. You won't believe what Jenny did today. The cashier gave her too much change, and she walked right back and returned it. I was so impressed with her honesty. Hearing that you see them that way, when you don't think they're listening, can be more powerful than 1,000 direct compliments. It feels like the unvarnished truth. 4. Model the behavior you'd like to see. If you want your kids to admit when they're wrong, you have to admit when you're wrong. I was really grumpy this morning and I yelled at you for no good reason. I'm sorry. When you model that it's okay to make mistakes, to be imperfect, and to take responsibility for it, you give them permission to do the same. You show them that being a person isn't about being one thing all the time. It's about being a mix of strengths and weaknesses, and that's okay. 5. Remind the child of their past successes. When a child is convinced they can't do something because of their role, I'm just bad at math, you can become their historian. You can remind them of a time they overcame a similar challenge. I remember when you thought you'd never be able to learn to ride your bike, but you kept practicing and practicing, and now you ride it all over the neighborhood. You know how to stick with something even when it's hard. This helps them see that their current struggle isn't a permanent state of being, but a temporary problem they have the tools to overcome. 6. When a child acts according to an old label, state your feelings and/or your expectations. You don't have to ignore it when they fall back into old patterns. But instead of reinforcing the label, see you're so irresponsible. You state your feelings. I don't like it when I have to run out at the last minute to buy poster board for a project that's due tomorrow. I expect you to let me know about school supplies you need ahead of time. You're addressing the behavior, not the role, and setting a clear expectation for the future, giving them a path to act differently next time. 7.1. Putting it all together. The symphony of skills. So you've learned a bunch of new tricks. Acknowledging feelings, engaging cooperation, avoiding punishment, fostering autonomy, praising descriptively, and breaking roles. The real world, however, isn't a neat little chapter in a book. Life with kids is a chaotic, unpredictable mess, and problems don't come at you one at a time. They come in a raging tidal wave of spilled juice, sibling warfare, and existential dread about what kind of monster you're raising. The 7th chapter is about moving beyond isolated techniques and learning to weave these skills together into a coherent approach. It's about being a jazz musician of parenting, not a classical pianist who can only play what's on the page. I once tried to build a piece of IKEA furniture by following the instructions one step at a time, without looking ahead. I ended up with a bookshelf that looked like a modern art sculpture and was about as stable as my last relationship. You can't just apply these skills in a rigid, linear fashion. You have to be able to mix and match, to improvise, to feel the rhythm of the situation and respond with the right combination of tools. The existential choice is this. Are you going to be a rigid rule follower who panics when life goes off script? Or are you going to become a flexible problem solver who can adapt to the beautiful disaster that is your family? The point of putting it all together is to recognize that these skills are not mutually exclusive. They're designed to be blended. A single, tense interaction with your child might require you to start by acknowledging their feelings. You sound really angry that your brother broke your Lego tower. Then move to engaging cooperation by describing the problem. I see 1,000 Lego pieces all over the floor. Then offer a choice. You can pick them up now, or we can do it together after a 5-minute cool down. And finally, use descriptive praise when it's done. Look at that! Every single piece is back in the bin. That took a lot of focus. It's a dance. Sometimes you lead, sometimes you follow, and sometimes you just try not to step on each other's toes. Faber and Maslisch show through dialogues and comics how these skills can be combined in real-life scenarios, demonstrating that there's no one right way to handle a situation. The goal is to have a whole toolkit at your disposal, so you're not just reaching for the same old hammer every time you see a nail, any problem. It's about developing a new language, a new way of being with your children that is grounded in respect and empathy, even when you're frustrated and at the end of your rope. 7.2, the reality check. It's not about perfection. Let's get one thing crystal clear. Adopting these methods will not turn your children into perfectly behaved angels, nor will it turn you into a Zen master of parenting. You will still have bad days. You will still yell. You will still revert to old habits and say things you immediately regret. The book is brutally honest about this. The goal isn't perfection. It's progress. It's about changing the overall weather in your home, not preventing the occasional storm. The real test of these skills isn't whether you can use them perfectly all the time, but what you do after you've completely blown it. Can you go back to your kid and say, "Hey, I'm sorry I screamed at you. I was feeling really overwhelmed. Let's try that conversation again." That act of repair, of modeling imperfection and apology, is often more powerful than getting it right the first time. The authors share stories from their own lives and from other parents, filled with frustrations, setbacks, and partial successes. They show parents struggling with the new language, feeling awkward and phony at first. They show kids reacting with suspicion to their parents' sudden change in communication style. Why are you talking like that? This is all part of the process. Learning a new way of communicating is like learning a new language. At first, you're slow. You make a lot of mistakes, and you sound like a tourist with a phrasebook. But with practice, it becomes more natural, more fluent, and eventually, it just becomes the way you talk. The book's final sections are a collection of letters from parents years after they first read the book, along with Q&As that address common sticking points and complex situations. What if my kid has a disability? What about when I'm just too tired to do any of this? These sections serve as a crucial reminder that this is a long-term practice, not a quick fix. It's a lifelong commitment to communicating with more respect, more empathy, and more humanity for your children and for yourself. The ultimate message isn't be a perfect parent. It's try to be a little less of an asshole today than you were yesterday. And honestly, that's a goal we can all get behind. 8.1 The Afterword. Echoes from the Trenches. Years after unleashing this communication revolution, Faber and Maslisch came back to answer the inevitable question. Does this stuff actually work in the long run, or is it just a cute theory? The Afterword sections are a collection of letters from parents around the globe who had been using these methods for years. It's a raw, unfiltered look at the messy reality of trying to be a respectful parent in a world that often encourages the opposite. The letters aren't all sunshine and rainbows. They're filled with stories of failure, frustration, and the constant struggle of breaking old habits. One parent writes about how, even after years of practice, their first instinct in a crisis is still to yell and threaten. I get that. My first instinct when my internet goes out is to threaten my router with a hammer, not to calmly troubleshoot the problem. We're all wired for rage and impatience. Reprogramming that is a bitch. But the letters also share moments of stunning breakthrough. Teenagers opening up about their fears, siblings resolving conflicts peacefully, and parents finding a new sense of connection with their kids that they never thought possible. The existential gut punch here is that this isn't a one-and-done solution. It's a lifelong practice, a constant returning to the principles of empathy and respect, especially after you've spectacularly failed at them. What's fascinating about the follow-up letters is how the skills evolve as children get older. The same principle of acknowledging feelings that works on a toddler having a tantrum over a banana also works on a teenager who is devastated about not making the basketball team. The language changes, but the core idea remains the same. Your job is to connect with and validate their emotional reality before you do anything else. One letter describes a father sitting in silence with his teenage son after a tough breakup, just offering a quiet presence and a simple, "This must really hurt." That's it. He didn't offer advice or platitudes. He just shared the emotional space, and that made all the difference. These stories from the trenches of parenting serve as a powerful reality check. They show that the goal isn't to eliminate conflict or bad feelings. That's impossible and, frankly, undesirable. The goal is to learn how to navigate that conflict and those feelings in a way that builds connection instead of creating distance. It's about teaching kids that home is a safe place to have ugly feelings and make ugly mistakes, because there's a process for dealing with it all that doesn't involve shame or punishment. 8.2, the Yes But section, tackling the hard cases. Every parent who reads this book will have a list of yes, but questions. Yes, but what if my kid just laughs in my face when I try to describe the problem? Yes, but what about when they lie? Yes, but what about when I'm too damn tired to be a goddamn communication expert? Faber and Maslish devote a significant portion of the updated editions to these tough, real-world objections. They don't offer easy answers, because there are none. Instead, they workshop the problems, applying the core principles to these more complex scenarios. For the kid who lies, for example, the typical response is punishment and a lecture on morality. The authors suggest a different path. First, you deal with the feeling that led to the lie, usually fear of punishment. I'm guessing you were worried about how angry I'd be if you told me the truth. Then, you affirm that you'd rather have the difficult truth than an easy lie. And finally, you problem solve whatever the original infraction was. It's a longer, more emotionally demanding process, but it's one that actually addresses the root cause of the lying, rather than just punishing the symptom. This section also addresses the crucial issue of parental burnout. It acknowledges that there are times when you simply don't have the emotional bandwidth to be a patient, empathetic guru. On those days, the authors suggest, sometimes the best you can do is the bare minimum. I'm too upset to talk about this right now. I need a timeout. This itself is a powerful lesson for a child. It models self-regulation and the importance of taking space when you're overwhelmed. It shows them that even adults have limits and that it's okay to hit pause instead of exploding. The authors also tackle special situations, like dealing with children who have developmental disabilities or severe behavioral issues. While the book is not a substitute for professional therapy, they argue that these communication principles, clear boundaries, respect for feelings, and a problem-solving approach are even more critical for children who struggle with emotional regulation and social cues. The fundamental message of this Q&A section is one of radical pragmatism. It's not about dogmatically sticking to a script. It's about understanding the spirit behind the skills, the spirit of respect and collaboration, and then adapting them to the messy, infuriating, and beautiful reality of your own unique child and your own imperfect self. 9.1. The Next Generation, The Legacy of Listening. The 30th anniversary edition of the book adds a poignant and powerful layer, an afterword by Joanna Faber, Adele Faber's daughter, who is now a parenting expert herself. This isn't just a gimmick, it's the ultimate proof of concept. Here is a person who was raised with these methods, talking about what it was like to be on the receiving end, and how she now applies the same principles to her own children. It's the human equivalent of a longitudinal study. Joanna talks about how, as a child, she sometimes found her mother's communication techniques annoying and weird. She describes rolling her eyes when her mom would say things like, "I see a little girl who looks really frustrated right now." I can relate. If someone talked to me like that now, I'd probably tell them to cut the psychobabble and just get to the point. But she also talks about the profound underlying sense of being seen, heard, and respected that these methods created in her home. Even when the technique was clunky, the intention behind it, the genuine desire to understand and connect, came through loud and clear. The existential takeaway is that the specific words you use matter less than the spirit you use them with. You can fumble the script, but if your heart is in the right place, the message of love and respect will still land. Joanna Faber's perspective provides a crucial validation of the book's core philosophy from the inside out. She shares memories of how her parents' refusal to use punishment forced her and her siblings to actually think about the consequences of their actions and develop a sense of internal morality. She recounts how being given choices gave her a sense of power and competence, and how having her feelings acknowledged, even the bad ones, made her feel safe and loved unconditionally. But she also brings a fresh, modern perspective to the table. She talks about applying these skills in the age of smartphones and social media, and how the core principles are more relevant than ever in a world that is constantly trying to distract us from genuine human connection. She shares her own failures and struggles as a parent, demonstrating that even for someone who was literally raised on this stuff, it's still hard work. Her voice serves as a bridge between the original generation of readers and the new one, showing that these ideas aren't just a relic of the 1980s, but a timeless and adaptable framework for raising thoughtful, resilient, and emotionally intelligent human beings. 9.2 Author's Main Theses. Let's boil this whole thing down to its brutal, essential core. If you strip away all the cartoons, anecdotes, and exercises, what are the fundamental, unshakable truths that Faber and Maslisch are trying to hammer into your skull? These are the load-bearing walls of the entire philosophy. 1. Feelings must be accepted, even if actions must be limited. This is the bedrock of everything. Your kids' feelings are not the problem. They are just a reality, like gravity. You can't argue them away or tell them they're wrong. You must accept and acknowledge all feelings: rage, jealousy, hatred, despair, the works. However, accepting a feeling is not the same as accepting any action that comes from it. I can see you're angry enough to hit your brother. Tell him how you feel with your words, not your fists. This single principle, separating feelings from behavior, is the key to raising a child who can manage their emotions without suppressing them. 2. Parenting is about problem solving, not power. The traditional parenting model is a dictatorship, benevolent or otherwise. You have the power, they don't, and your job is to use that power to enforce compliance. This book argues for a radical shift from a power-based model to a collaborative, problem-solving model. When there's a problem, a messy room, a missed curfew, a broken rule, the goal isn't to punish the offender, but to work with them to solve the problem. This involves describing, giving information, and offering choices. It fundamentally changes your role from enforcer to consultant. 3. Dependency should be discouraged. Autonomy should be fostered. Your primary job as a parent is to make yourself redundant. Every time you do something for a child that they could do for themselves, you are robbing them of an opportunity to develop competence and self-reliance. The goal is to systematically and intentionally step back, to let them make choices, struggle, fail, and learn from their own experiences. This fosters a sense of autonomy that is the foundation of a healthy, functioning adult. 4. Praise should be descriptive, not evaluative. Most of the praise we give our kids is a judgment of their character. You're so smart. This creates anxiety and a dependency on external validation. Helpful praise or encouragement is descriptive. It describes the child's effort or the specific details of their accomplishment. You worked on that puzzle for a whole hour and you figured it out. This helps the child develop their own internal sense of worth and satisfaction, which is far more robust than any compliment you can give them. 5. Children will live up to or down to the roles we cast them in. We unconsciously label our kids: the shy one, the responsible one, the troublemaker, and they tend to conform to these roles. These labels are prisons that limit a child's potential to be their full, complex self. A key task of parenting is to actively fight against this typecasting, to look for opportunities to show a child a new picture of themselves, and to give them the freedom to grow beyond the boxes we've put them in. These 5 theses form a revolutionary and, frankly, much harder path for parenting. It requires more patience, more self-reflection, and more emotional control on your part than the old-school model of command and punish. It's about choosing your problem. Do you want the easy, short-term fix of being a dictator, or do you want to put in the hard, long-term work of raising a person you might actually want to have a beer with one day? Choose wisely. 10.1 Author's Main Theses, continued. So let's continue to drill down into the core theses, because this is where the rubber meets the road. These aren't just neat ideas. They are the fundamental operating system for a family that doesn't implode from resentment and passive aggression. We started on this last time. Now let's finish the job. The first thesis, that feelings are always okay, but actions aren't, is the most important and the most violated rule of human interaction. Your kids' feelings are like a force of nature, a hurricane of rage, a flood of sadness. You can't stop the hurricane by yelling at it. You can only acknowledge its power and build a shelter. Trying to tell a kid you shouldn't be angry is like telling a tsunami to be less wet. It's absurd, and it makes them feel crazy for experiencing a natural phenomenon. I once tried to explain to an ex-girlfriend, logically, why she had no reason to be upset with me. That conversation ended with my laptop being thrown out a second-story window. My impeccable logic didn't calm her down. It invalidated her reality, which is an act of war. Your kid is the same. When you acknowledge their feelings, wow, you are so angry you look like you could spit fire, you're not condoning their desire to burn the house down. You are simply validating their internal reality. This act of validation is what calms the storm enough for them to hear you when you then say, "And we don't set the cat on fire. Let's find another way to get this anger out." If you skip the first part, the second part is just noise. The second thesis, shifting from power to problem solving, is about voluntarily giving up your dictatorship. Let's be honest, being the boss feels good. Your ego loves it. But fear-based leadership gets you resentful compliance, not willing cooperation. A kid who cleans his room because he's afraid of being grounded learns nothing about responsibility. He learns about threat avoidance. Think of the worst boss you ever had. The micromanager, the yeller, the one who ruled by intimidation. Did you go the extra mile for that person? Or did you do the bare minimum to not get fired? Now think of the best leader you ever had. The one who trusted you, gave you clear goals, and then got out of your way. Which one inspired your best work? This is the same choice you have as a parent. When you shift to describing the problem, there are clothes all over the floor. Instead of barking an order, clean your room. You are implicitly saying, I see you as a competent partner in maintaining our home, not as a lazy servant who must be commanded. It's a radical transfer of respect, and it's the only way to cultivate a genuine sense of responsibility. It requires you to swallow your ego and your desire for immediate, unquestioning obedience. But in return, you get something far more valuable, a kid who starts to see problems as things we solve, not as things you yell about. The third thesis, fostering autonomy over dependency, is about the brutal, beautiful task of making yourself obsolete. Our deep-seated fear is that if our kids don't need us, they won't love us. So we keep them needing us. We cut their food long after they can hold a knife. We pack their bags for them. We solve their social dramas. We create perfectly manicured bonsai children, beautiful to look at, but utterly incapable of surviving outside their tiny pot. True love is not about making someone need you. It's about giving them the strength to leave you. It's about stepping back and letting them struggle with the damn jar lid, even when it's painful to watch, and you could just open it in 2 seconds. Every struggle you save them from is a lesson in competence you steal from them. Fostering autonomy means you have to be okay with them failing. You have to let them get the C on the project they did all by themselves, rather than getting the A on the project you basically did for them. It requires you to trade your short-term comfort for their long-term capability. It's the ultimate act of letting go, of acknowledging that your role has a planned obsolescence. And that's not a tragedy. That's the whole point. The fourth thesis, using descriptive encouragement instead of evaluative praise, is about inoculating your kid against the addiction to external validation. Evaluative praise, "You're so smart, you're a good boy," is like a drug. It gives a quick, easy high, but it creates a junkie who is always chasing the next fix. It makes a kid's self-worth fragile and dependent on your judgment. Descriptive praise, on the other hand, is like teaching them how to cook their own meals. Instead of, "This painting is beautiful," you say, "Look at the way you blended the blue and yellow to make that green, and you used a tiny brush for all those details." You're not giving them the answer. You are good. You're holding up a mirror and showing them the evidence so they can come to that conclusion themselves. I did do a good job. The positive feeling comes from their own assessment of their own work, which builds a rock-solid internal sense of competence. It takes more effort than just blurting out "good job," but it builds a foundation of self-worth that won't crumble the first time they fail, and there's no one there to tell them they're still great. Finally, the fifth thesis is about freeing children from the prison of roles. We do this without even thinking. He's our little athlete. She's the shy one. These labels are scripts, and once a kid learns their lines, they'll play that part for the rest of their life unless someone gives them a new script. The troublemaker will keep making trouble because it's the only way he knows how to get attention and fulfill his designated role in the family system. Breaking them out of these roles requires you to become a talent scout for their hidden abilities. You have to actively look for moments that contradict the label. When your messy kid puts one dish in the dishwasher, you don't ignore it. You pounce on it. You say, "I saw you put your plate away without being asked." That's what I call being responsible. You are offering them a new character to play, a new identity to try on. It's about refusing to accept the story you've always told yourself about who your child is, and instead paying attention to who they are capable of becoming. It's about granting them the freedom to be more than one thing, the freedom to be complicated and contradictory, and to grow in unexpected directions. Ultimately, this whole book boils down to a single, difficult choice. You can have the easy problems of parenting, yelling, punishing, and controlling, and in return, you get the hard life of raising resentful, dependent, and anxious kids. Or you can choose the hard problems of parenting, listening, being patient, controlling yourself, letting go, and in return, you get the better life of raising resilient, autonomous, and emotionally aware kids who might actually call you when they don't need something. There are no shortcuts. There are no magic words that will make your kids perfect. There is only the daily, grinding, and deeply meaningful work of trying to be a decent human to the little humans you're responsible for. So choose your problems. That's the only choice you real inclusion themselves. I did do a good job. The positive feeling comes from their own assessment of their own work, which builds a rock-solid internal sense of competence. It takes more effort than just blurting out "good job," but it builds a foundation of self-worth that won't crumble the first time they fail, and there's no one there to tell them they're still great. Finally, the fifth thesis is about freeing children from the prison of roles. We do this without even thinking. He's our little athlete. She's the shy one. These labels are scripts, and once a kid learns their lines, they'll play that part for the rest of their life, unless someone gives them a new script. The troublemaker will keep making trouble because it's the only way he knows how to get attention and fulfill his designated role in the family system. Breaking them out of these roles requires you to become a talent scout for their hidden abilities. You have to actively look for moments that contradict the label. When your messy kid puts one dish in the dishwasher, you don't ignore it. You pounce on it. You say, "I saw you put your plate away without being asked." That's what I call being responsible. You are offering them a new character to play, a new identity to try on. It's about refusing to accept the story you've always told yourself about who your child is, and instead paying attention to who they are capable of becoming. It's about granting them the freedom to be more than one thing, the freedom to be complicated and contradictory, and to grow in unexpected directions. Ultimately, this whole book boils down to a single, difficult choice. You can have the easy problems of parenting, yelling, punishing, and controlling. And in return, you get the hard life of raising resentful, dependent, and anxious kids. Or you can choose the hard problems of parenting, listening, being patient, controlling yourself, letting go. And in return, you get the better life of raising resilient, autonomous, and emotionally aware kids who might actually call you when they don't need something. There are no shortcuts. There are no magic words that will make your kids perfect. There is only the daily, grinding, and deeply meaningful work of trying to be a decent human to the little humans you're responsible for. So choose your problems. That's the only choice you really have. That's it. I'm done. Thank you.